I came home from class that afternoon and the living room sounded wrong. Empty. I didn't know silence could be that loud. The air felt off, like when someone moves your furniture an inch and your body notices before your brain does. The piano was gone. Not just moved. Gone. The corner where it stood was stripped clean. No sheet music, no bench, not even the little cup Dad used to drop coins in after gigs. I just stood there, hand still on the doorknob. Quick note. Before listening, share which city or country you're watching from, and let's continue. My name's Corvin Wainwright. Most people call me Corey. I'm 30 now, but back then, I was just a kid from Richmond walking into a room that didn't make sense. Our Mason and Hamlin Model BB had sat in that living room since before I was born. It wasn't just furniture, it was the house. My dad, Miles, treated it like a church altar, and I mean that literally. He'd clean it with cloths meant for communion cups. He wasn't famous, but when he played, people listened. Real still. He wrote his own music and played like the keys could hear him back. Mornings, I'd lie belly down on the hardwood, cheek against the floor. When he hit those low notes, they'd rattle straight through my ribs. That's how love worked in our house, sound you could feel. When I was 12, Dad took out a loan and paid close to 12 grand to record his own album. Nothing fancy, just him, that piano, and a quiet guy behind glass at a Richmond studio. He kept the master and made maybe 100 copies. Gave most away to friends, said it wasn't about the money. One morning he said to me, not dramatic at all, "This piano's the only thing in this house that never lies." I didn't get it then. I do now. He died fast. 1 month we thought he had a sprain, next month it was cancer in the bones. His hands kept shaking, but he still played until he physically couldn't. He was gone before he turned 42. I was 18. Right after the funeral, my mom, Lenora, stood in the kitchen holding a stack of bills and said, "Your dad didn't leave anything but debt," just like that. No crack in her voice, no pause, like she was reading off the weather. I nodded. I believed her. That's what sons do when they still want to be good. What I didn't know was that she'd already invited Rhett Kincaid over for coffee. Rhett showed up the week after the funeral, right on time, like he'd booked a flight before my dad was even in the ground. He came with a pressed shirt, that antiques dealer voice that made everything sound like a business transaction, and a grief makes people act strange smile that never reached his eyes. Mom acted like he was some kind of savior. She said he was going to help put things in order, like grief could be filed alphabetically if you just had the right folders. She started living inside those folders. The woman didn't cry once. Instead, she walked around with binders under her arm and receipts in her pockets like she was preparing for an audit, not mourning her husband. She told me, medical debt's around 63,000, maybe more with interest, like she was reading off a weather report. I didn't argue. I still couldn't breathe right. My chest felt poured full of cement. At the memorial, this older guy approached me, Eamon Barrett. He had a cane and a respectful way of standing, like a man used to being ignored unless music was involved. He leaned in and asked, real quiet, "Did Miles leave you a letter?" I opened my mouth, but Lenora appeared out of nowhere, hand on my shoulder, and steered me toward a group of cousins I barely knew. She said later, "Eamon's always been dramatic. Some people can't handle emotions without turning them into stories." A week later, she sat me down at the kitchen table with a folder thick enough to choke someone. Her voice was calm, rehearsed. She said, "Your father didn't make a will." Exact words, clean delivery. I could tell she'd practiced it in the mirror. I asked about Dad's album. He'd put so much into it. Money, time, pride. She gave me this little smile like I'd asked if Santa was real. "Honey, it never made money. Maybe a couple hundred a year, tops." Then she flipped to a page in the folder like that was the end of the conversation, but it wasn't for me. I called Aunt Delia. I hadn't talked to her much since the hospital, but I remembered Dad squeezing her hand in his last days. She picked up sounding like she was already in a rush to hang up. When I asked if Dad left anything written, anything at all, she hesitated just long enough. Then she said, "Let your mom handle it, please. Just don't pick fights right now." That pause told me more than her words did. She wasn't grieving. She was afraid. And back then, I didn't know what to call that feeling, but I knew it wasn't right. Then came Rhett. Lenora introduced him like a product pitch. He understands finances. He understands assets. My stomach turned. That word, assets, was a red flag. We weren't talking about memories anymore. We were talking about inventory. He started walking through the house like it was a museum that needed downsizing. First week in, he looked at the piano and said, "That's a big footprint for one item. Not your father's piano, not his instrument, just a footprint." I didn't say anything. I swallowed it, like I always did. But that night, I locked my bedroom door, sat on the floor, and stared at the ceiling until morning. I didn't know it yet, but the peace I thought I was keeping, that was just the first payment on silence. The first thing Rhett did was take down the poster from Dad's last show. It was framed in black wood, hung right above the fireplace. I came home from class one day, and it was gone. Lenora said it had gotten dusty, and she didn't want it to fade. 2 days later, I found it shoved in the back of the coat closet next to a busted umbrella and a broken vacuum. Then the sheet music vanished. She said it was being boxed up for protection. Same with the home recordings, compact discs, thumb drives, even the old cassette tapes. I caught her sealing them in Tupperware and stacking them in the garage like leftovers nobody wanted. That garage hit over 100 degrees every summer. I said something, mild, nothing confrontational, and Rhett stepped in with that calm control voice of his and said, "We're decluttering, Corey. You should try it sometime." When I pushed back harder, Lenora stepped in with, "Why are you stuck in the past?" I didn't answer because I already knew it didn't matter. To them, my dad had become a pile of stuff, and I was the weird one for still caring. Then Tamsin moved in. She treated the place like a cheap hotel. Came in at 2 in the morning, loud and barefoot, crashed on the couch, slept until noon, and rolled her eyes if anyone asked about rent or plans. Always between jobs, always waiting on some mysterious check. Rhett said she was just figuring things out. Meanwhile, he spotted her cash, let her borrow his car, talked about opportunities. He acted like her enabler, and her sponsor rolled into one. Lenora played family accountant. She'd say, "We're all making sacrifices right now." And somehow, that meant me picking up more of the load. Groceries? I started paying for those sometimes. My car insurance? Suddenly my problem. I was still in school working part-time, but I was told this was character building. The piano stayed, for a while. I didn't play it much because Rhett hated it. He never said it outright, but every time I played, even just a few notes, he'd show up in the hallway and say things like, "That sound makes the house feel heavy." One night I sat down and played something small, an old piece Dad wrote, something soft and short. Just needed to hear it, even for a minute. Lenora came in mid-song, walked over and shut the lid. Her hand was steady. She didn't yell. Just said, "Don't do this tonight." That was the moment it clicked. I wasn't the son anymore. I was the liability. After that, I said less. Smiled when I had to. Ate dinner like a guest in my own home. I started applying for out-of-state programs, school, jobs, anything that gave me a reason to leave. I didn't leave like some rebel storming out. I left like somebody pulling a plug in silence. Philly came into my life when I needed it most. I moved into a shared apartment, found steady work doing fraud analysis for a firm that handled medical billing audits. Nothing dramatic, but I learned something fast. Real theft doesn't start with someone breaking a lock. It starts with a form, a signature, a phrase like, "This is just policy." Philly gave me distance, but it didn't buy me peace. Lenora started calling every few months, always with that voice like I owed her something just for being born. She pushed the family card until I finally caved. I told myself I could survive a weekend. That was my mistake. The house didn't look like home anymore. They'd painted over the walls, swapped out the furniture, even changed the curtains. The place smelled like a model home, fabric softener and candles, fake comfort, nothing real, nothing my dad had touched. It was like they'd renovated the truth right out of the walls. Tamsin looked twitchy the whole time, pacing with her phone in her hand, checking it like she was expecting a verdict. She snapped at the dog, snapped at Lenora, snapped at me just for asking what time dinner was. Rhett stayed calm. That's what made him dangerous. His calm was never neutral. It was loaded. "We're going to have a conversation like adults," he said, motioning toward the living room like it was a conference room. Lenora sat beside him on the couch. Tamsin stood behind them, arms crossed, eyes darting. Rhett started slow, measured. Tamsin's had some financial trouble, some debt. It's escalated. I leaned forward. "How much trouble?" Lenora jumped in with her classic deflection. "It's not about the number, Corey. It's about urgency. People are calling. It's serious." He cut her off. "It's about $27,000, mostly credit lines, payday loans, high interest." I didn't look at Tamsin because she was already avoiding my eyes. I stared at him. "And you're telling me this why?" Rhett didn't blink. "We need to act fast. Sell the piano." I laughed, not because it was funny, just disbelief choking its way out of my mouth. "You want to sell the only thing left of my father to cover payday loan debt?" Lenora smoothed her dress like she was adjusting her morals. It's just a thing, Corey. You don't live here anymore. Right, I said. So now it's up for grabs. Rhett went back into professional mode. It's an asset and it's sitting unused. It can solve a real problem. I said, she's not dying. She's in debt. He didn't flinch. Debt gets dangerous. Then, quieter, like he was doing me a favor, he added, refusing to help could put your mother in legal jeopardy. They always had a line to cross that sounded reasonable, until you looked closely. A couple days later, I came back from a walk and saw the moving truck. Two guys with lifting straps were already inside, rolling the piano toward the front door like it was an appliance. My legs moved without asking. I blocked the doorway and said, "Where's the paperwork?" Rhett handed me a folder. It had a sales agreement, typed clean. My name was on it. My signature, too. Except it wasn't mine. I stared at it. They'd forged it. Close enough to fool a stranger. But I knew my own handwriting. I looked straight at Lenora and held up the page. "You want to talk about this?" She didn't even blink. "Don't turn this into a scandal." I waited for denial. Instead, I got damage control. "It's just a piano, Corey. Don't make us look like criminals over an object." Rhett stepped forward. His voice dropped half a pitch. "If you go to the police, you'll be the one who burns this family down. That's how people will remember it." I stood there, fists at my sides, breathing through my teeth. I didn't yell, I didn't swing. I walked past them, up the stairs, and shut my door. The next morning, I packed a single bag, walked out of that house, and didn't look back. No slam, no speech, just a clean exit. Even then, I still didn't want to be the problem. I didn't take much when I left Richmond. Just the essentials: laptop, clothes, a couple notebooks, and the last shred of dignity I had left. Philly wasn't a fresh start. It was triage. I found a one-bedroom that smelled like radiator heat and old carpet, and I started over one file, one invoice at a time. I worked. A lot. 9-hour days turned into 12. I read spreadsheets until my eyes stung. I tracked payment trails for clients who didn't care about the people involved, just the numbers. But somewhere in the middle of all that, I learned how to read lies in ink. I learned what a cover-up looked like when it wore a suit. I never said the word mom to anyone. Didn't mention Tamsin. Didn't explain why my throat locked up every time I heard a piano in a public place. I let people think I was just private. It was easier than telling the truth and sounding bitter. Lenora sent texts on the big holidays. Thanksgiving. New Year's. They were clean, rehearsed things like, "thinking of you," or "hope you're doing well." No guilt. No apology. Just a tone like I had drifted away for no reason. Like she'd been the one left behind. Rhett didn't text at all. He sent messages through her, little phrases tucked in her emails like, "Rhett hopes you're staying focused," or "Rhett said you always had a good head for finance." He knew exactly how to twist the knife without ever picking it up. Then one day, months after the piano was gone, Tamsin texted me out of nowhere. She wrote, "You didn't have to make it such a big thing. It wasn't personal." I stared at it, took a screenshot, saved it, didn't reply. Aunt Delia was the only one who showed her face in person. Even then, it was rare. She'd meet me at diners halfway between her school and my office, usually with a hat on and sunglasses like she was doing something illegal just by sitting with me. She never talked directly about the house, never said Rhett's name unless I brought it up first. But one afternoon over coffee, she leaned in and whispered, "He keeps records on people." I frowned. "What kind of records?" She looked out the window like someone might be watching. "Just be careful, Corey." I didn't ask more. I knew fear when I saw it. Almost a year after the piano sale, I was working a temp consult job when my inbox pinged with an unexpected name. Nolan Ives, an indie director. He was trying to clear music rights for a film he'd made years ago and used a track credited to Miles Wainwright. He couldn't get a straight answer from the current rights holder. Said the company sounded fake, something called Kincaid Heritage Media. That name made my throat lock up. I didn't tell Nolan who I was. I just asked him to send over what he had. His email came with a short note, "Hope this helps," and an attachment showing the registered rights holder, Kincaid Heritage Media, Limited Liability Company. That was the moment everything snapped into focus. That name, Kincaid, my mother's new last name, Rhett's name, stamped across my father's work like a cattle brand. I sat there, screen glowing in the dark, and said it out loud to no one. They stole it. And for the first time, I stopped calling it grief and started calling it what it really was. I was sitting at my kitchen table, watching condensation drip down a takeout cup, when my phone lit up. Lenora. I didn't move at first, just stared at the screen like it was a trick. She hadn't called in over a year. I let it ring out once, twice. I already knew the rhythm. Guilt first, facts never. But something in me said, pick up. Her voice was soft, almost papery. Corey, I need to talk to you. I'm sick. I said nothing. Terminal, she added, like that would unlock me. There's paperwork, power of attorney, medical releases, things Rhett needs to handle while I still can. That word, paperwork, hit like a shovel. Same tone she used after Dad died. No warmth, no, I miss you. Just business. Then Rhett's voice came on the line like an unwanted guest slipping into the room. Corey, he said, smooth as ever, we don't want to drag this out. Our attorney has the packet ready. We can even have a notary at the house. This doesn't need to be complicated, I asked. Why me? You're her son, he said. You'll regret it if you don't do the right thing. Let's keep this out of court. I told them I'd think about it. Rhett's tone didn't change much, just enough. Don't take too long. People get confused when they wait. That line didn't sound like a warning. It sounded like a leash. 2 days later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail. Something made me answer. Corey, it's Delia. Her voice wasn't shaking this time. It was clear, firm. Before you walk into that house, you need the truth. She sent an email before I could respond. I opened it while she stayed on the line. Attached was a scanned letter. Dad's handwriting, not typed, not lawyered. Just him, speaking plain. It was dated 2 weeks before he passed. It said, Corvin is my only heir. I leave him my compositions, my piano, my rights. He'd listed the titles, 7 of them, every piece he'd ever recorded. And at the bottom, in darker ink, he'd written, the original is inside the bench. False bottom. Eamon Barrett witnessed it, Delia said. I kept the scan. I was afraid. Afraid of what? Rhett told me if I interfered, he'd accuse me of theft. Said he'd ruin my job. He knows people on the school board. I called Eamon next. I didn't ease into it. He answered on the second ring. I said, did my dad leave a letter? He didn't ask who I was. Just sighed. I tried to tell you at the memorial, he said. Your mother cut me off mid-sentence. That night I sat with the letter in front of me. The scan was grainy, but the truth was loud. Lenora didn't call because she missed me. She called because she wanted the door locked behind her one last time. I didn't feel rage, not fire, not fists. What I felt was colder, focused, like someone flipping on a flashlight in a dark hallway. I stood up, opened my laptop, and started making a list. I didn't storm into Richmond with accusations and fire. I sat down at my desk, opened a legal pad, and wrote 2 columns. What I knew and what I could prove. The first name on the list was the piano dealer Rhett claimed handled the sale. I called pretending to be just another guy tracking an instrument's provenance. The owner answered like he was in the middle of a commercial. Oh yeah, we moved that Mason and Hamlin fast. Beautiful piece, big footprint, but collectors love 'em. I asked the sale price. He rattled it off like it was nothing, an amount that felt at least $5,000 too low for the model. Guy we sold it to paid cash, well, certified check. Quick deal. Old doctor out in Maryland. That led me to Dr. Orson Price, retired cardiologist, piano enthusiast, collector of high-end instruments. I expected a wall, got the opposite. He picked up the phone and answered in a careful, deliberate voice. When I explained who I was and that the original sale might have involved a forged signature, he paused. Not shocked, just quiet. I wondered when someone would call, he said. He told me the bench creaked during a minor restoration and the tech found a false bottom. Inside was an envelope. My name was written on it in my dad's hand. I never opened it. It felt personal. I still have it, Dr. Price said. If you'd like to come get it, I'll make time. While I was untangling that thread, Nolan Ives, the indie director, sent over the email chain with his publisher. It was all there. Maeve Hanley, legal counsel for a mid-sized music rights firm, had emailed Rhett's limited liability company 3 times asking for updated proof of ownership for the tracks used in Nolan's film. I reached out to her myself, told her my name, sent a scan of my identification, explained the situation. I didn't dramatize it. I just laid it out. She didn't offer sympathy. That's not what I needed. She sent facts, the contract, the licensing form, the payee name, Kincaid Heritage Media, limited liability company, formed just months before the first licensing deal. Registered agent, Rhett Kincaid. She included a payment ledger. Not massive amounts, but steady. Annual checks. Some small, some in the thousands. Enough to pay rent, enough to lie about. I pulled out an old folder and started printing. The scanned letter from Delia, the email from Eamon confirming he'd witnessed it, the limited liability company filing, Maeve's contract, her ledger, the full email thread from Nolan, the bill of sale from the piano dealer, and a screenshot of Tamsin's little wasn't personal message. It built itself like a case file, clean, linear. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Just one line. Stop digging. You won't like what you find. I stared at it. Didn't need to guess. I texted back. I already have the documents. No swearing, no threats, just the truth. And after that, silence. Not an hour of it. Days. Then a week. The kind of silence that only happens when guilty people realize the balance shifted, and they're not the ones controlling it anymore. I parked across the street and just stared at the house. It looked like someone had shrunk it. Same roofline, same porch, but smaller. The door was a deep navy now, like they'd tried to erase the past with paint. The tree Dad planted out front was gone. Just a stump and a patch of sod pretending it hadn't mattered. Inside, I noticed the floor first. Always the floor. Right where the piano had sat for decades, there was a faint outline in the wood, a ghost-colored rectangle that even refinishing couldn't erase. I stood there for a second, toe on the edge of it, like I was checking if the truth would hold. Lenora came out of the hallway slower than I remembered. She looked sick, real sick, not the kind you can fake for sympathy. I felt the reflex rise, keep her calm, protect her, smooth everything. Then Rhett walked in behind her with that practiced smile, and that instinct dropped dead in my chest. He didn't waste time. Handed me a folder and said, "Let's make this easy." The agreement was professionally drafted. Every page had signature tabs and highlighted initials like I was just there to finish the job they started without me. I flipped through it, a full release. No claims on the limited liability company, no rights to the recordings, no ability to contest the piano sale. A legal erasure with my name on it. I didn't even sit. I just set their folder on the coffee table, opened mine, and started stacking. Delia's scanned letter, Eamon's statement, the limited liability company registration, Maeve's ledger, the fake bill of sale with my forged signature. Rhett gave a half laugh. "Scans can be faked." I looked at Lenora and asked, "Is that your husband's handwriting?" Her eyes dropped. That was all I needed. Tamsin was standing off to the side, arms wrapped around herself like she wanted to disappear into the drywall. I said, "Remember the debt excuse you gave me?" She flinched, like I'd hit her with a sentence. Lenora finally broke the silence. "We used the music money to keep the house stable. That's all it was." Rhett cut in with, "It was management. We didn't steal. We restructured." I stared him down. "You took what wasn't yours. Call it what you want, but don't insult me with spin." Then Tamsin out of nowhere said, "It wasn't just the house. The debt was bigger than what they told you. Rhett's been helping me for years, but helping doesn't mean free. He kept me stuck with it." That cracked the room open. I didn't let it shift the target off him. I looked at all three of them and said, "Here's what happens next. You sign a statement acknowledging Dad's letter. You transfer all rights to me, and you help buy back the piano from Dr. Price. No delays, no loopholes." Rhett tried the sympathy route. "If you push this, your mother's last months will be full of stress. That's on you." I stepped in closer. "You already heard her. You just made me carry the silence for it." I didn't show up with a lawyer and threats. I showed up with paperwork the way they had, just not forged, not stolen, just true. I called Maeve Hanley again and filed the ownership challenge the right way, filled out every form, attached every document, acknowledged the witness statements. She reviewed it all and said, "This will freeze payments until it's resolved." That was the start. No yelling, no courtroom. Just a calm wall of process they couldn't charm their way through. The next call came from Wyatt Rourke, the settlement lawyer. He tried sounding annoyed. "You're making this more complicated than it needs to be," he said. I told him, "I'm not negotiating feelings. I'm correcting ownership." His tone flipped after that. Less arrogance, more caution. Then I called Dr. Orson Price, told him everything. He didn't hesitate. "I knew it didn't feel right," he said. "You can have the piano back at what I paid. No markup." He even sent photos of the false bottom in the bench, the envelope still intact, right where Dad said it would be. Eamon Barrett backed it up. He forwarded me a thread of emails from shortly after the funeral, him reaching out to Lenora, referencing the letter, offering to talk to me. That ended any doubt. She hadn't forgotten. She hadn't misunderstood. She'd known. She just decided to bury it. Tamsin sent me screenshots, dozens of them, messages from Rhett over the years. "If you stay quiet, I'll keep covering it. Let me do the talking. You'll only make it worse." Don't panic. Panic makes people look guilty. She hadn't been innocent, but she hadn't been free either. He kept her in debt and dependent, his own personal cleanup crew. When Rhett realized the publisher payments had stopped, he switched gears, called me directly, calm at first. Then he tried to threaten. You work in finance, right? Be a shame if someone raised questions about your ethics. I didn't flinch. I investigate fraud for a living, Rhett. You just walked into the wrong building. Then I filed a complaint with the state licensing board about his appraisal business, narrow and targeted, just the forged signature, the fake sale, the personal conflict of interest. The same credibility he always used as a weapon, that became the first thing to crack. Lenore signed the letter acknowledging the will with shaking hands. She didn't cry, didn't apologize. She looked exhausted, like the lie had been a weight she was finally done holding. Rhett refused at first, sat there with that fake poise like he still had cards to play. Then Lenora looked at him and said, voice flat but firm, "This ends now." He signed. Not because he changed, because he was cornered. I stood, packed up my folder, and looked at the room like it had just been inspected. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't look back. I walked out steady, finally done asking permission to be my father's son. The movers came on a Thursday morning. No ceremony, no cameras. Just two guys with gloves and straps, lifting the Mason and Hamlin like it was a living thing. And in a way it was. They eased it into my apartment like they knew. Like they could feel this wasn't furniture. It was someone coming home. I didn't speak, just watched, arms crossed, eyes locked. When they left, I stood there in silence for a long time. The sun hit the lid just right. A little dust caught in the light. My reflection looked older than I remembered. I opened it. The hinges groaned, same as always. Sat on the bench. Let my hands hover above the keys. They felt uncertain, like they needed permission. Then I played. Just a warm-up progression, one my dad always started with. Nothing complicated, but the sound filled the room like it had muscle memory, like it knew where it was supposed to be. It didn't sound like Richmond, but it felt like it. Deep in my ribs, low notes buzzing like they had back when I used to lie on the floor and listen with my whole body. That feeling didn't belong to them. They never touched it. The publisher updated the records and redirected the royalties. Not much, enough to matter. Enough to prove truth isn't always loud, but it leaves a trail. Nolan Ives re-cleared the film rights and sent me a short email that said, "I'm sorry I was part of that without knowing." I told him, "You weren't the villain. You were the flashlight." Delia came by and stood in the doorway crying the first time she heard it again. "I should have told you sooner," she kept saying. "You told me when you could," I said, and I meant it. Lenora's health dropped fast. I didn't become her nurse. I wasn't there to rescue her from the weight she'd chosen to carry. I visited once, said what I had to say, and left before guilt could twist into something dishonest. Rhett's client stopped calling. Quiet professional consequences, no headlines, just forms and ethics boards and phone calls he couldn't bluff his way through. He built his power on paper, and it turned on him the same way. Tamsin moved out. She didn't ask me for money. She didn't beg for peace. She just said, "I want to start paying people back." I didn't stop her. I didn't help either. That was her step to take. I play now most mornings early, just like my dad did. I don't pretend I'm him. I don't try to be. But when I hit those low keys, I can feel the old house under my ribs again, like the floor remembered. They used my silence like a signature. I took it back. They never get to use it again. Hold up, real quick. Can I ask you something? If your own family forged your name and sold off something that carried your parents' legacy, would you stay quiet to keep the peace, or would you blow it up and take it back? If you've got the hype feature, tap it to support this video and help it reach more people. Please subscribe and like too. It's one click and it matters a lot. Then drop a comment, even good story, or tell me what you'd do in my place.